I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is the 84th episode of Fruity Knitting. There's one type of project that I haven't yet knitted on the show, and that's shawls. But I do really appreciate that shawl knitting is very popular for lots of good reasons. It's a great way to use up single skeins of luxury blends that you've either bought yourself spontaneously or have been given to you. You can also be much less accurate with your gauge without worrying about having major fitting issues when the project's finished, and that's fantastic for less experienced knitters. And also shawls are just great flat canvases to learn new stitch patterns and techniques on. So I thought it's about time we had a shawl specialist on the show. And Melanie Berg is probably the most prolific shawl designer there currently is. So she specialises in designing shawls, and she's constantly bringing out new, really stunning, eye-catching variations. So we've got a two-part interview with her today. And so she's going to show us a good selection of her shawls, and she also talks about the inherent advantages and disadvantages of the different shawl shapes and how she uses colour for dramatic effect. And she shows us her favourite way of wearing shawls and her favourite finishing tip. So I think many of you will have heard of the name Melanie Berg, and so I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know her as a person. But I think shawl lovers, you're going to particularly be in heaven.
Yeah, I of course have knitted a shawl on this program.
And it was Melanie Berg's.
A Melanie Berg shawl.
Yeah.
Many of you love our Meet the Shepherdess segment, so you'll be pleased to know that it is part of today's program. This time we're featuring a 19th century farmer called Susie. Susie works in Living History Museum. She's been doing that for over 30 years, and today she's going to take us back in time and talk about her 19th century sheep farming methods and the yarn that she produces. It's really cool. You're going to love Susie. We're also announcing the winners of our Woolly Wormhead Hat Cowl. We're launching a new cowl, and Andrea's going to be sharing some of her thoughts on skin colour.
Yes. So some of you noticed that during the last two episodes, I was working on this purple project and you wanted to know what it was. Well, I'm going to tell you all about it today. It's my new project. Here's a picture of it. It's called Dove, and it's a design by Louisa Harding. And we interviewed Louisa Harding back in episode 59, and that interview actually came out exactly this time last year. And I think Louisa's designs are just really beautiful, classic and timeless. And most of her designs, I would say, are pretty easy to knit. She doesn't use difficult constructions or difficult techniques. But at the end, they just look $1 million. Like this design here is one of hers. It's called Aquila. And I totally loved the way it fitted and the way it looked. So I wanted to do another one of her designs. This one was knitted in her cashmere gilly, which is a DK weight yarn. It's 100% cashmere, and my new design is going to be knitted in her cashmere lace weight yarn. They're both 100% cashmere yarns. Now I want to say something really quickly about pilling, because some of you asked me to share my experience with particular yarns on pilling. Just to let you know, I will never say publicly that a certain yarn pills a lot, because I don't think that's fair, but if I use a yarn and I wear the garment a lot and I find that it doesn't peel and I'm really thrilled with it, then I'll tell you about it. And this yarn fits into that category because it is 100% cashmere, and I wear this top a lot, don't I?
Yep.
And I'm not precious with it. I'm fairly rough, aren't I?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a single ball, not a single peel on it.
No, it still looks fresh.
It looks fresh and just as beautiful. And seriously, there is not a single ball on it, and that's amazing. And so it goes against the popular belief that cashmere always peels. And I actually first learned about this when I was interviewing Andreas from Maya, because he's a real fibre specialist, and he said cashmere doesn't have to peel, and I thought, that's weird. And the reason why is sometimes in cashmere yarns, they use the short cuts and they will cause the peeling. So apparently it's a combination of having top quality cashmere and the longer cuts coupled with really top spinning knowledge. And that can produce a yarn that is stunningly soft and still doesn't peel. And this is testament to that. It is so good. So if you want to invest in a luxury garment, I just can give you 100% endorsement, purely from experience. Anyway, back to this new design. This one's in lace, And my version is going to be, I would say, a lot more dramatic than the original design. The original design is very soft and elegant and beautiful, but mine's going to be pretty dramatic because I'm using this as the contrast colour, this really bright orange, which I totally love. Louisa helped me pick it out back at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, so I fell in love with this colour and I really wanted to use it, and she suggested that I put this lavender colour with it. And I think it's pretty cool. It's going to be a statement, a real statement top. So the construction of it is you have 4 pieces. It's knitted in 4 flat pieces. So a front, a back, and 2 sleeves. They're all knitted flat, and you join them all flat at the underarms, and then you knit the yoke in the round, and it's got raglan shaping. So the construction's pretty much the same as the one I'm wearing. And then when you're finished, you just sew up the side seam of the sleeve seam and the side seams, and then it's finished. So here's a picture again of the original, and you can see that it's completely stocking stitch, or nearly completely stocking stitch, because the hem on the body is a wider garter stitch panel. And then on the sleeves, you've got that they're quite long, the cuffs, and they're ribbed, but above the ribbing, you immediately increase lots of stitches so that the sleeves are a little bit blousy above those long cuffs, and I think that's really pretty. So I'm going to do a few changes like I always do, and typically the first change I make is I knit it at a different gauge.
Let me guess.
Looser or tighter?
Yeah, let me guess. You're knitting it tighter.
Yes.
God.
Okay, so it is a lace weight yarn, let me tell you. It's very fine, and the recommended gauge is to knit it at 24 stitches and 36 rows. And I've actually seen a knit up sample in Louisa's store of the same design knitted up at the recommended gauge, and it looks great. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks very beautiful. But nevertheless, I still want to knit it at a tighter gauge because I don't think I'm going to lose any drape, because it's you can see I can make it drapey, very, very drapey.
It's looking drapey.
And it's such a fine yarn, I don't think I'll lose drape on that. But I do think it'll last longer, and it'll look nicer or neater for longer, because if you do have a looser gauge, you're more likely to get a catch, or it to even over time stretch out of shape, because it's just a looser fabric, and a tighter gauge will help work against that. So that's what I wanted to do, especially, and I wear my knitwear every single day apart from a few hot days in the middle of summer, and like I said, I don't want to be precious with them. I just want to wear them. So I think a tight gauge will be an advantage for me. But my gauge has actually ended up to be closer to a machine knitting gauge. It's around 32 stitches and 45 rows. So I'm really making life very hard for myself. This, you probably can't see this, but it is so fine, and there's a ton of knitting in this. There's a few other changes I've made too, because over the last year, I've actually developed a little bit of middle-aged spread, and I've got a tummy.
It's middle-aged curvaceousness in this household.
Okay. Yeah. And I love what this design does with the Aquila. She puts splits down the side. So what it does is it looks nice and fitted down the side, so it makes you look like you've got a good waist. And then the lower half of it is just looser and more flowing, so it doesn't sort of go underneath your belly and hug it. And that's what I wanted to avoid with this one, because it's long. So I also put splits in this one here. And on top of that, I put in a single purl column down on both sides to sort of imitate a fake seam, and that should help stop it from twisting on the bias.
Because you're knitting it in the round, did you say that?
Yeah, because I'm knitting it in the round.
You just told us it was in 4 pieces, and now...
Well, just to help myself, to cheat a little bit, since there is you've got to do 45 rows to get 10 centimetres, I thought if I just whiz around in
knitting.
Knit stitch, I'll do it much quicker. So it's knitted in the round up to the armholes, and I put in those purl columns for fake side seams, and that should help it from twisting on the bias. And I put in the splits to make it flow over my middle-aged tummy.
Curves.
And okay, so that's that bit done. I've also done a sleeve completely up to the armholes here. Here it is here. Oopsie, that's inside out. And because my my row gauge is so small, I had to actually add in an extra stripe. So there's meant to be only 6 stripes here on the cuff, and I had to put in 7 just to get the length that I needed. And that's where the difficulty is going to be for me with this design, because because of my row gauge, I'll have to completely rework the raglan shaping. And I have to admit, I'm quite nervous about this, so you have to wish me luck, because you've also got these thicker bands or stripes that are coming across here, and I'm going to have to either make each of my band a little bit thicker or add in an extra stripe. And I'm nervous about that because I think Louise's version is so perfectly balanced and looks so beautiful. I don't want to stuff it up. I don't want mine looking worse. Yeah. So I am actually quite nervous about that. Wish me luck.
So continuing with under construction, my current project is this beautiful cable cardigan designed by Michelle Wong. It's called Celine, and I'm using the Devonia DK from John Arbon Textiles. I want to tell you a little bit about that yarn. The yarn is actually a combination of 3 different long wool breeds. That's the Exmoor Blueface, the Blueface Leicester, and the Wensleydale. They're all long staple yarns, so long. And a long staple yarn has a really tight curl. It's like a ringlet in it. And that's different to what you might find in a merino, for example, which has a really tight crimp. There's not much crimp in a long wool yarn. And the result of that, together with the fact that it's normally spun as a worsted yarn, so worsted spinning, is that you get a very drapey fabric. Okay. Yeah. So that's, Andrea's shown her her drapiness, and there's mine. Andrea's got her favourite test for checking for the drapey tendency of a yarn, and we're going to demonstrate that here today. So if I take I'll pull that down the bottom, take my Devonia DK, we can see we do the drape test, and there it flops over. And this floppiness is the indication that it's going to be a drapey fabric that you produce with the yarn.
I'll hold the floppy yarn.
You hold the floppy one, behave yourself. Now, to compare with that, we do have a merino skein here. This is 75% merino and 25% angora, so mainly, Andrea, mainly merino. Like I said, the merino's got this really tight crimp, which is really good for a nice snuggly jumper, but it doesn't have the same drapey behaviour. When we hold that up, you can see it sticks up nice and solid.
Even if you hold it right from the very bottom, you might get a bit of a flop, but not as floppy.
Yeah. So this is the floppy test for a drapey fabric. You are...
You have to hit someone when you've got a skein that does
trouble.
this. This is yarn bashing.
If we can proceed.
Okay, we'll proceed.
The other bit of news on my project is that our daughter Madeline is home, and that's important because this garment is actually for Madeline. It's nice to have her home anyway, but it was really good because Andrea did a fitting session with Madeline and measured her up and held up this bit and checked it all out. And the good news is that it's all good, it fits, and I don't need to rip back any of my work, which would have been really sad.
That's a real relief.
I'm very relieved about that.
So there's the back.
Yep, there's the back. There's the front. They're both done up to the armhole shaping. And the reason that I've kind of stopped at this point is that Andrea is using her just-in-time design method.
But I have showed you how to proceed now.
Yes, you have just now shown me how to proceed. But so Andrea leaves it until the last minute to tell me how to do any different bits.
Because I'm so busy, I don't have time. So I only bother doing it when you really need it.
That's right. It's always very exciting. Find out what's going to happen next. Anyway, that's there. I think it's going to be really good.
And we should point out that the reason why he doesn't do it is because I don't let him.
Yeah, I'm an apprentice. I'm not trusted.
Because we can't make a mistake on this because we want Madeline to wear it and we don't want her to end up looking like this when she's walking around.
Yeah, not able to move her arms. Yeah, so there we go. That's that project.
Well done.
It's good.
So...
a couple of weeks ago, Andrea and I drove about 2.5 hours from our home right here in Offenbach up to Bonn. And the reason we did that was to meet with Melanie Berg, and we conducted an interview with her, and part 1 of that interview is coming up right now.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm here with Melanie Berg. This morning Andrew and I drove up to Bonn where Melanie lives. And today we're going to delve into the topic of shawls, designing them and knitting them, because Melanie is best known for her very beautiful shawl designs, and she's published well over 100 shawl designs, including 2 books, and her second book is coming out later this year. So Melanie, welcome to Fruity Knitting, and thanks so much for agreeing to come here.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Good.
Really excited.
Good. So as an introduction, can you tell us what led you to knitwear design, and also give us an insight into what motivates you when you're designing and what your style is?
Okay, so what first led me to knitwear design? Well, first of all, I wasn't a knitter, so at first I had to be led to knitting, and my mother taught me when I was a young child. But I quickly put it down again, picked it back up when I was a teenager, and I made something that was very ugly, really. I didn't like it at all in the end. So again, I put it down, and it had to rest for a couple of years. And then when my first daughter was born, I picked it up again because it felt very natural to me, and I wanted to make something with my hands for the baby. So that was a very, it felt right at that moment. And from then things just happened. I discovered Ravelry. I discovered that there were knitting patterns actually, which I didn't know about before. And then I found that I was knitting from patterns, but I tweaked them a lot. So I changed little things here and there. And in the end, I thought, okay, if I change so many things, then I can actually write my own patterns. And that's how it began. So that was my first contact with knitwear design. I never thought this would become my job at some point of time. It really started as a hobby, but then just, as I said, it just happened. Mm-hmm. So the style of my work, I knit what I like to, or I design what I like to wear. So that's why I don't do any baby things anymore, because my children have grown out of that age. So I was focusing on the things that I like to wear in my free time. And I just love shawls, so that's why I make a lot of shawls. I would say the 2 most important things are wearability and style. So these are the things I focus on. And
your style, would you describe that as, I mean, you've got a lot of colour, you can see beautiful colour here, but how would you describe your style if you can put it into words?
I would really say it's modern. So it's like when I walk into a store, stuff I see on the shelves and that I would like to buy for myself is what I'm also drawn to in design. So it's not too playful, it's more casual, and I try to not overload designs. Sometimes when you are new to designing, you have a lot of ideas and you want to merge them all into one design, and then in the end it might just be too busy. So I usually try to focus on one element and put that on display.
Yeah, okay. Actually, to be a successful full-time designer, you do have to be publishing patterns really regularly. So can you say something about your design process and also what you do to keep ideas constantly flowing?
I think keeping ideas constantly flowing is something that you have to learn. It's as in every job, there is always things to learn. You are not like perfect from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's more like a trial and error. In the beginning, or especially I think when you're doing this as a hobby, you can sit and wait for the inspiration to strike you. But if you are working on deadlines, then you just have to learn how to process an idea or how to get an idea from everything that you see, just to keep things in flow. And
so I can see a sketchbook here, which I really want Melanie to show us, and also some swatches. So maybe just talk through maybe a typical design, how you'd go about.
Okay, so very typically for me is to start with the yarn. I don't like to start with a plain idea, because I might have an idea in my head, and then like if I work for a magazine, they assign me the yarn, and then I see, okay, but the yarn and the idea, it just does not work well together. So I usually like to have the yarn at first and start thinking from there. So I would take a look at the quality of the yarn, like what characteristics does it have, what's the drape, what's the yarn weight, what's the fiber content. And then I try to find a stitch pattern that really works very well together with that. And then the next thing is usually deciding on the shape. So what actually do you want to knit from it? Should it be a shawl or a garment? And if so, what construction do you want to have? And then it's swatching. There's a lot of swatching involved all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what about with your sketches? Do you sketch for every pattern? Can we have a look at some of them?
Yes. Funnily, this shawl came out exactly as the sketch. This was a very easy design, I think, very geometrical, very clear. It's a shawl with the name Sangaku. This is how the shawl looked like when it came off the needle. So.
Yeah. Okay. So when you were sketching it already, did you know you were going to use garter stitch and do this as colour work and not a stitch pattern, or?
Yes, I knew. So I knew which yarn I was going to use because that was a magazine publication, and they told me which yarn they would like to have in the magazine.
Yeah.
So it was pretty clear to me that would be a colour work shawl, but it's very common for me to change or switch techniques as I swatch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else can you show us as an example?
This is another shawl. I had a stitch pattern in mind already. I wanted to use the stitch pattern along the border of the shawl. The outcome looked totally different than what I sketched, because as I started knitting, I just saw that it does not really, I don't like what I see. I have to make something different. So from a semicircular round shawl shape, we've now moved to a triangular asymmetrical shawl shape. And also the stitch pattern. So they're like elliptic holes, and here they point upwards, while here they point more like along the border.
Right.
So
yeah.
I just found that I preferred the look of this one. So this is just to see that, or to show that things really change as I knit. It's very much a trial and error for me.
I'm not going to ask you what a typical day looks like, because I'm sure every single day is very different. But how much actual knitting time do you get on an average day? And also, do you ever feel like you get a little bit lonely or feel a little bit isolated because you are working from home? And also, I imagine that the contact that you've got through work is mainly via the internet.
That's right. So the knitting time a knitwear designer gets is actually pretty low. Yeah, probably most people think if you're a knitting designer, it means you're sitting there knitting all day. But no, you're actually sitting in front of the computer all day. So it's mainly pattern writing and communication, project planning, organization. So this is, I would say, at least 50% of my work, and maybe 30% knitting time. But of course, I always have several projects. So if one project is in test knitting, then I'm already working on the other. But sometimes I need very much time to figure out a certain stitch pattern, and then the actual result in the end. So I have a little swatch that I can say, okay, but now it works, right? But you cannot imagine how much time went into this. And then sometimes you knit a huge shawl, which is mainly garter stitch in heavier weight yarn. You need not so much time, and you have something very visible in the end.
Do you knit every one sample of each of your new designs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I know that there are some designers who have actual sample knitters, so they can sketch an idea and write the pattern and then hand the knitting over to someone else. I don't want to do this because I change so many things as I go. And also the knitting is really fun. So this is the one part I don't want to hand away. So,
you still enjoy knitting. That's good to hear.
Yes.
Okay, so just very quickly say something about whether you feel isolated at times.
It can happen, but I have a lot of contact to knitters and other knitwear designers or yarn companies all over the world. So we stay in touch with email and we have collaborations. Also have a very busy family life, so we have 3 young children and they do keep us busy. So I'm happy if I have some lonely mornings.
Yeah.
Also, I can really appreciate that. And so I guess it's a bit of a mix.
So it's good for you. You feel very pleased with the way work's worked out for you. That's great.
Yeah.
So Melanie, I'm very happy, has agreed to talk through some of the different shawl constructions, and from a designer's perspective, talk about their inherent advantages and disadvantages and how to best show them off with different stitch patterns. So which one are we going to start with? We've got just 2 baskets here full of shawls.
So I tried to choose a small variety of shawls that are most interesting to talk about. And first of all, so I thought, if you want to start designing shawls, so what would be a good starting point? So what could be easy but also fun to do? And so that's why I first chose a rectangular shawl.
I'll be your assistant. You can tell me how to hold it. And
yeah, just like that. So most people think rectangular shawls are, I don't know, maybe not the most typical shawl that we see every day, and also maybe not interesting enough. I have grown very fond of them in the past years. A lot of knitting time goes into them because a rectangle is more or less 2 triangles. So if you think of a regular triangle shawl, it means you have to make 2 of them, twice the amount of yarn, time and money. But I think in the end it is very rewarding. So this shawl, I think you can get an idea of the fact that easy to make does not have to mean that the outcome is boring. So this is a very easy stitch pattern, and it's plain rectangular shape. That means you don't have to deal with increases or decreases. You can just knit straight ahead and still get a very beautiful result.
And I really like just this simple detail here of different stitch pattern on the triangle at the edge.
Yes, and this is it is just garter ridges, so it is not a complicated thing.
Yeah, great.
I found that usually keeping things simple and small gives a very elegant, rewarding output.
Yeah. It's really like a little blanket, isn't it? It's like a baby blanket, that size. Yeah. Okay.
All right, then another shape I would like to show is the elongated semicircular shape. So shawls like these usually have the cast on in the center of the upper edge, and then they have increases along the outer edge. It's typically 4, 6 or 8 increases per right side and wrong side row. The exact number will determine the final shape of the shawl. And this one, again, it is a very easy construction. So it is plain garter stitch all in the center of the shawl. And then it has an interesting feature along the border. As I said, increases only happen at the upper edge of the shawl. And here at the tips, you can see that there are even no increases anymore. So it looks like the tips are cut, but of course they are not cut, just the increases stopped.
Yeah.
To just add some more depth to the shawl without increasing the wingspan any further. So this, I would say, is also a very easy thing to start with if you first want to dip your nose into shawl design.
And I like the slip stitch pattern here. That's also very easy to do, but just very effective, isn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Another shawl shape, so my favorite, actually. I just love this shape. It is so wearable, I think, and very, very great in everyday life. It's the asymmetrical triangular shawl shapes. We've seen these a lot nowadays. I think like 4 or 5 years ago, if you did a pattern search on Ravelry, the classic bottom up or top down triangular shawl shapes were the ones that showed up most. But these asymmetrical shawl shapes in the past 5 or 4 years, they've gained huge popularity, and I think that is because they are easy to make and they are wearable. So shawls like this, usually they start at one tip, like here, with a very small amount of stitches to cast on, and then they have increases along the upper edge, while at the same time having decreases along the lower edge. All in all, the amount of increases is a little higher than the amount of decreases, so the size of the shawl grows. And the bind off is done here along this
Okay, with the
opposite
I-cord,
lower
yeah.
edge. In this case, with an I-cord binder.
So are there any particular shapes where you really need to know that you can't run out of yarn? Because if you stop early, you're going to have a big problem. Is that the case with this shape?
No, because you start with very few stitches and then you increase the stitch count and then you can basically stop anytime you want. This was also true for the semicircular shawl we've seen before.
Yeah.
In general, I would say it is true for all the shawls that start with few stitches and then increase from there. Of course, there's other ways of constructing, like think of a triangle and then you don't start in the center of the upper edge, but your cast on might be the outer border of the shawl.
Yeah.
And then you don't increase stitches, but you decrease them. Say you decrease 6 stitches every right side row or something like that. At some point of time, all your stitches will be consumed. And then if you are not happy with the dimensions of the final shawl,
stuck with it.
You're stuck with it. I mean, you can find a workaround, like you can pick up stitches along the border to add some more size. But as a beginner, I would say it is much easier to start with fewer stitches and then knit until you run out of yarn, out of motivation, or until you find that the size is now pretty good.
Okay. And are you going to show us the latest one?
I have one more. This is actually an example for a shawl where you are determined from the
right from the start.
Right from the start.
You need to know your yarn.
Because
this is very long, isn't it?
It is very long, right?
So it goes here. And then
this tip is the beginning of the shawl. So you cast on very few stitches. And you have increases along both edges. And then you have decreases here where this spine is running in the center. Again, the amount of increases is higher than the amount of decreases. So all in all, the size grows. And then you do that for a while. And then once you've reached this point here, I don't know if maybe the shawl is too big. Once you've reached this point here, you stop doing the increases along the bottom of the shawl. So all in all, the stitch count stays the same and this spine will just slowly move towards the edge of the shawl.
Yeah, okay.
So in this case, you have to know that you have enough yarn because you cannot. There is no way you can say that you stop earlier because you would have like a cut out from the shawl.
Okay, so now what about blocking? Because some of the really tricky designs or unusual shape designs really need quite hard blocking to work well. Mm-hmm. So what can you say about blocking with different shapes?
Yeah, I found that blocking triangular shapes is usually easy. Mm-hmm. Where you have to give a lot of tension is the semicircular elongated ones because the upper edge of these shawls appears straight. Yeah. It is not actually a straight edge because from the start you are knitting a triangle. So you are knitting something like this. And then when you're done, you have to force these edges to become like a straight line. And depending on the yarn and the tension you've used, this line might jump back after a while. And sometimes you tend to have like a little bulging. It's bulging out in the center of the upper edge. This might be problematic sometimes. I found the triangles are usually easy to block. Also the rectangular ones. Most importantly for me when I block is I think about the look of the edge of the shawl. So do I want to have a straight edge or do I want to have like a little pointy edge? If it's a straight edge, then you have to use blocking wires. I don't think there is a way around them. Otherwise you will have a very like a zigzaggy looking edge. Yeah. So if you want this clean, elegant look, you will have to go for the blocking wires.
Okay. Now, just really quickly, what about yarn? Because if you've got a difficult shaped shawl that you really want to stay well blocked, what kind of yarn do you recommend using? Blends of things? Because you don't want something that's got too much memory. You know, because then they sort of...
They will not stay there. It's so hard to say, I think, because like merino does not always mean merino, silk does not always mean silk. Nowadays, yarn is Also, yarn is processed quite heavily in the superwash process, in the dye process, in the spinning process, obviously. So I find it hard to give a rule of thumb here. What I would advise, if you are unsure, make a mini version of the shawl, right? Really just a tiny one, and give it a good block, and then put it in your handbag for a week, and then get it out and see how it looks like. So is it still in shape? If so, then you're probably good to go. If it looks very strange, then maybe use another yarn.
Okay, but do you basically like to use blends with your shawls, or what's your favourite? Blends or just pure wool? You don't have a favourite?
I don't have a preference.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that we have so many different
It is.
yarns and blends available. I very much like fingering yarn, fingering to sport weight yarn. So this is like a corner I stay in, but dip my nose out from time to time. But
you can get a lot of good fine detail in fingering, can't you?
Absolutely. I found that I'm not a huge fan of silk. So like 100% silk yarn, I just don't like the feel on my fingers.
Yeah.
So I'm more going into the woolly
blends.
Welcome back. Part 2 of that interview is coming up later in the show, and there Melanie talks about how she uses colour and stitch patterns to create dramatic effects. She also shows us her favourite way of wearing shawls, and she shares her very special quick and dirty method for weaving in the end, so there's still a lot to come. Melanie's offering Fruity Knitting patrons a 20% discount off all of her self-published patterns, and there are around 130 designs to choose from, most of them shawls. So it's a shawl knitter's dream. The advantage of knitting shawls is that you don't have to worry about fit, as Andrea said. So if you're ready for a relaxing knit, a shawl could be the right next project for you.
So I thought we'd have a little bit of fun in the next section and talk about colours, because some people have asked me, how do I know what colours suit me best? So I want to talk about that subject today. But before we get into it, there's a disclaimer. First of all, I am not trained as a professional colour analyst or colour theorist or anything like that. And I think a lot of what I'm about to say, many of you will know anyway. And on top of that, there are people who love to feel free to just wear whatever colour takes their fancy, and they do that very happily. So for those people, I'm in no way trying to impose a set of rules on you at all. This is just fun, and it's something that's actually helped me a lot. And I first learned about it when I was about 13 years old, because my mum at the time had read some of these very popular colour analysing books, and she got super excited about it. So she analysed everybody in the family, found out what their colouring was, and changed everybody's wardrobe. And so it was actually quite a lot of fun, and I got bitten by this enthusiastic bug, and it hasn't really stopped. But it has been really helpful for me, and one of the practical things that it does is it means that if you buy your clothes within the colours that suit you, they will all mix and match super easily. So you could go into your wardrobe with your eyes shut and pick anything out, and it's going to go well together. And you might even find some unusual colour combinations that you wouldn't have thought of, but they'll really go. So that is helpful.
Yep.
The very first, I think the most important factor to understanding what colours suit you best is to understand the undertone colour of your skin. So actually the colour of your hair and your eyes plays a fairly minor role, and I think that's where some confusion comes in, because people get fixated on your hair colour or your eye colour, but it's really the undertone colour of your skin, which never changes throughout your whole life and regardless of how much sun you've got. So obviously there's lots of different skin colours with races, whether you're black or brown or Asian or Caucasian, that is all different. But nevertheless, that's not the interesting bit, because, and there's always exceptions, but most people can be divided up into two groups. Either the undertone colour of your skin is blue, or the undertone colour of your skin is like a golden colour. And when I say golden, I mean yellow that's going towards orange. And if you pick up colours that have the same undertone to them as the undertone of your skin, then you'll look more radiant, or your skin will look fresher. You'll look like you've had a good night's sleep. And the opposite is the case. So luckily for us, I'm warm, so I've got a golden undertone to my skin, and Andrew's got a blue undertone for his skin. So we're kind of excellent opposite examples here. So hopefully my demonstration will be clearer and it'll work. So you can, whether you're warm or cool, you can wear almost any colour, but there's a warm and cool version of almost every colour. So the next thing you need to do is to understand to be able to read what the undertone colour of a colour is. It's a bit confusing. But before you do that, you want to analyse yourself. What is the undertone colour of your skin? And this can also be a difficult thing to do. For some people, it's dead easy. If you're a natural born redhead, then you're warm. Regardless whether you're like sandy red or deep auburn red, you're warm. So you're very easy. But that doesn't mean to say that if you don't have any red hair that you're not warm. This is sort of where the confusion can happen. There's a couple of things you can do to try to figure out whether you've got a warm or cool undertone to your skin. If you go into natural sunlight and have a look at the skin on the inside of your arms and have a look at the veins, if the veins are blue turning purplish, chances are you're cool. If they're blue turning green, chances are you're warm. That's one thing you can do. You might find that's not really clear. You might have to compare yourself with a few other people. Another thing you can do, and this only really works well for light coloured skins, so people with light skin, is you put a white towel around you and get all your hair off back from your face with a white towel around you. Wear no makeup, and again in natural sunlight, put a white piece of paper against the skin on your neck. And if not your face, don't look at your face, but on your neck. If your neck is showing up slightly reddish in comparison to the white paper, you're probably cool. If it's showing up sort of yellow, golden, or even apricot, you're probably warm. So there are a couple of tests you can do to see if you're warm or cool. What I personally find easier is just to go to extreme colours like this. This is an orange, or this is a yellow that is heading towards orange, so it's a really obviously warm colour. If you put that up against your face, and again, do it in natural sunlight with no makeup on, because makeup can really confuse the issue. If your skin, if the way your skin looks against it, if you look anywhere between fairly good and totally ravishing, you're probably a warm coloured person. If you suddenly feel like you've lost all the colour, or you're looking grey, or you're looking extra tired, you're probably cool. So I think I can wear this colour. Now, I'll show you on Andrew. And I'm trying to make a strong case for it. He's actually wearing a cool colour. Grey is cool. So he can particularly wear grey and look good in it. But if I take this deep blue, which is definitely a cool colour, and I put it up against him, you can see, hopefully, that he looks really radiant.
Yeah. Looks stunning, really.
You look stunning, very spunky. It just makes his skin looks good, he looks aglow, and he looks alive. Yeah. So keep that in your eye socket. And then have a look at him in this colour. So I hope you can tell that he just doesn't look as stunningly handsome. He looks slightly, maybe even either grey or even a little bit jaundiced, but he just doesn't look fresh. I hope you can see that comparison. If that happens to you, chances are you're also cool. So that's one way that you can tell fairly quickly. Once you know what you are, whether you've got a cool or warm undertone, you need to be able to detect whether a colour has got a cool or warm undertone. So loosely speaking, again, a colour that has a goldy undertone to it will be warm. A colour that's got a blue undertone to it will be cool. This is where it can also be confusing, because you can take two reds and people might automatically assume that red is warm. But you can get different shades of red. And this red, for instance, has got a blue undertone to it. I hope you can see on the camera the colour is not going to read perfectly, but this is cherry. It's definitely got a blue undertone to it. You may be able to see that. Andrew looks really good in that. This colour, in comparison, has got an sort of like a yellowy, orangey undertone to it. So this is definitely a warm red, and that's a cool red. So, and I look better in this red than I do in that red. Another colour that you might immediately assume is warm is pink. But a lot of pinks actually have a blue undertone to them. So if you think, particularly fuchsia, if you think of fuchsia, it's got a really strong blue undertone to it. And this is sort of fairly close to fuchsia. It's a bit muted, but there's a lot of blue in this pink. And Andrew, do you like being a model?
Looking good, yeah.
You're looking stunning. Yeah. You like me telling you you're looking stunning.
That's right.
So he looks really good in this pink.
Yep.
Now, hopefully, because I've got makeup on, so you may not see this, but I don't look so good in this pink. I actually look a little bit more orangey in an unattractive way. So this is not a good colour on me. But, and I don't have all the perfect colours to be able to compare well.
There it is.
But say this pink in comparison. So that's got a blue undertone to it. This is really bright, so it's not showing as a good comparison, but this has got a lot of yellow in it. So any pinks that have got yellow in it, I can wear more successfulully. So you can actually wear a version of every colour. Yeah, so if I take green is the other thing I wanted to say. So if you can divide yourself into cool colours or warm colours, but you can also divide it further. Perhaps you look better in all of the light cool colours or the dark cool colours or the light warm colours or dark warm colours. Andrew looks good in the dark colours, and that's sort of where your hair and your eyes come in more to help you judge that. And on top of that, you can divide into clear colours or muted colours. And a muted colour is where you take a colour and you take a little bit of its very opposite colour and mix it in, and it muddies that colour up a little bit, it mutes it. And they make quite interesting colours actually. And some people's complexion just looks better, more radiant against a muted colour than it does a really clear colour. If the colour's too clear, it can wash them out somehow. So wow. There we go. But I hope that's been sort of useful to you in some way. It can get pretty tricky in the fact that, so here we've got a green. Now, most greens have got yellow in them. So most warm people can wear a version, nearly every green. I can wear nearly every green. This is a green that's got a ton of blue in it. And Andrew looks really good in it, if you can notice that. Mm-hmm. But this is a green that's got a ton of yellow in it, like a goldy yellow. And in comparison, he just doesn't look as good. Where I think I look better in this green.
Yep.
So, Darls, there we go.
Yep. So, from my point of view, I tend to simplify things a lot and look for the practical application. And what I've learned out of this is that you'll find me a lot more attractive if I wear my clothes rather than wearing your clothes.
Yes. That's true.
Semicircular on we go, heel for heel and toe for toe. On and on we go, off from Barry's wedding. Plenty herring, plenty meal, plenty pig to fill her cradle. Plenty bonny bands as well, that's the toast from Barry.
My name is Susie Begg and Crack, and I bet you don't dress like this. I'm a living history interpreter, and today I'm dressed in the common work dress of the 1860s. I'm dressed as a 19th century farmer because I am a 19th century farmer. As a living history interpreter, I work and volunteer at museums and historic sites. A living history site means that you won't see me standing behind a red velvet rope telling you not to touch. Instead, you'll see me doing. You might see me in a log cabin cooking a meal on an open fire, or you might see me hauling buckets of water or shearing a sheep with hand shears. And of course, many times I'm doing fiber arts, spinning or knitting at a historic site. My degree is in history, and I've worked and volunteered at museums and historic sites for about 30 years. I know a lot about 19th century farming, but not very much about modern farming. So when I got my sheep, I decided to raise them using 19th century farming methods. This is partly because 19th century farming is what I know best, and partly because it gives your project an extra boost of authenticity if you're using a historic pattern with wool from historic sheep raised in the 19th century style. I studied the 19th century and especially the Victorian era, when Queen Victoria was queen from 1837 to 1901. And I primarily study my own geographic location, which is the Midwestern United States. I'm a living history interpreter for the 1830s, the 1860s, and the 1890s. Most of my yarn customers are museum staff and volunteers, history buffs, and reenactors. My yarn is accurate for the 1760s to World War II. The 1760s because that's when the spinning jenny was invented, and it was the start of milled yarn. And World War II because polyester fibers were invented during the war and available to the public after the war. People still knit with wool after World War II, but acrylics and polyester became very fashionable. I always say that my sheep breed is mostly merino. Merino was the most common breed during the 19th century. Thomas Jefferson had a flock of merino in the 18th century, and merino wool was used for Civil War uniforms in the 19th century. But they are not all merino. I have crossbreeds. I crossbreed with Cheviots and Dorsets. The legend of the Cheviot is that it came to America in the 1840s, when a Cheviot farmer sent Cheviot ewes to his daughters and Cheviot rams to his sons, knowing that that is worthless unless his children worked together in their new world and bred their sheep together. The Dorsets definitely came to California in the 1890s, but they probably came to America through the East Coast earlier than that. They were a very common English breed. I breed for healthy sheep. I don't show my sheep, so I'm not interested in show qualities. I breed for healthy sheep and good wool. The merino gives the wool the fineness that I want, and the Cheviot and Dorset give the sheep a hardiness to help them survive. Most of my sheep lamb on their own. I don't keep any ewes that have difficulty lambing. Most of my lambs are singles or twins. I occasionally have triplets, and when they do, I leave the triplets with the mama for just a couple days, and then I take the biggest one to raise as a bottle lamb. I find they do very well with twins, but not so well with triplets. In the summer, my sheep are on pasture, and in the winter, they eat grass hay, and only grass hay. This is because a 19th century farmer wouldn't waste good grain on a sheep unless he was fattening a lamb to take her to market. But I've also found that sheep feeding grass hay keeps their wool cleaner. I live in a dairy area, so my local hay has a lot of alfalfa in it. An alfalfa plant has a very small leaf that curls as it dries and becomes like Velcro. It sticks into the wool and is very difficult to get out. They still get a lot of grass hay in their wool, but the long grass fibers come out of their wool easier in the carding process than those tight little alfalfa leaves. My biggest day of the year, of course, is shearing day. I went to sheep shearing school and learned how to shear my own sheep. I found that I'm not very good at it and I'm very, very slow. At the time I went to sheep shearing school, the world record was 28 seconds per sheep, and I'm about 1 hour per sheep. So I did my own sheep when I started with just 5 sheep, but now I have about 30 sheep, so I hire a professional to shear them for me. After shearing, the fleeces are skirted. I skirt in a 2-step process. First, I lay them down in my upper barn, and I tear away the outer edges, which is the wool from their belly, their butt, and their knees. That's no good. Then I take the wool and I put it onto a makeshift table that I've made out of a horse trough and chicken wire. It's ugly, but it works. I walk around the wool, I shake it the whole time. I'm shaking it so that the small little bits of dirt and stuff fall out, also little second cuts fall out. And as I'm shaking it, I'm also inspecting it again and pulling out any burrs or low quality or matted spots. I don't like skirting. It's my least favorite part of the whole process. But the skirting is very important. I want my wool to be as clean as possible going into the mill so that it comes out of good quality. My wool is sent to Blackberry Midge Woolen Mill to be washed, carded, and spun. Blackberry Ridge was a working mill out east, and it was still working in 1987 when the owners inspected it. The oldest piece of machinery at Blackberry Ridge is the card, made in 1904 and 1905, and the newest piece is the spinning frame, made in 1954. The rest of the pieces were made in the 1930s and 40s. My yarn has lot numbers, but they are not dye lots. I don't dye my yarn. When my wool is brought to the mill, I choose how it gets spun. I split my wool into batches. This year I've split it into dark and light, so I will have one batch of white yarn and one batch of very dark yarn. I never really know what it looks like until I get it back, but I think that this year's yarn will be a very dark brown like this one. This yarn is made from all my fleeces together, so it's about half dark fleeces and half light ones. And then I also have various shades of gray made from different quantities of how much dark wool and how much light wool. I don't cull my own sheep. I will put down a sheep that seems to be in pain or suffering, but I pretty much let them die on their own. My pasture is big enough that my sheep eat for free in the summertime. And in the winter, I buy hay, but I figure an extra body in the barn generating body heat is a benefit to all of the sheep. I like the fact that most of my sheep die in the same barn they were born in. I don't wean my lamb. I let the mothers wean the lambs on their own at their own pace. And I breed on a natural cycle. The sheep breed in the fall and they lamb in the spring. This is the natural cycle, and it's what a 19th century farmer would have followed. Many modern sheep breeds are designed so that they can breed year-round. And the advantage is that if you wean the lambs early, you can get the ewe to breed again, and you can have 3 lambings every 2 years. But I don't do that. I'm very interested in the history of knitting. Many years ago, I worked at a museum that did an exhibit on the Red Cross. The Red Cross really pushed knitting during World War I and World War II, and I was able to interview some World War II Red Cross knitters. That was really neat. Most of my knitting is 19th century. Patterns tended to be vague, and a lot of the terms were different. For example, a purl stitch is often called a turn stitch, and knit plain means to knit in garter stitch. Some of the things I've knit with my wool are muffatees. I knit a lot of these. Today, a muffatee would be called a fingerless mitt. It's basically a hollow tube with a hole for the thumb. This is from the Workwoman's Guide, which was printed in 1838. There's no finger nubs at all, and there's no gusset at all for the thumb. It's just a tube with a hole for the thumb. The pattern says to knit a rectangle, and then you sew up and sew down for the thumb hole. Another thing I've knit is a zephyrine. This is also from 1838. This little bit of wool around your head and your ears really keeps you warm, and it's designed so it can be worn over a day cap and under a bonnet. This is also from the Workwoman's Guide. The Workwoman's Guide is a wonderful reference. It was written in 1838 by a lady. We don't know the name of the author. It's a very haughty book, which is what makes it so fun. She's an upper-class woman writing down to the lower classes, and she gives a lot of strange advice like a zephyrine must always be knit in stripes. And now, if the gentleman will avert your eyes, I'm going to show you my petticoat. This is a knit petticoat, knit from the 1864 December Godey's Ladies book. It's knit from the bottom up. It's all wool. It's pretty much a straight skirt. There's a little bit of decreasing as you go up, but not a whole lot. It's not a flary sort of skirt because it's not supposed to be seen. This is your underwear. This is 2 panels and then sewn together. So it's knit by a friend of mine, and not long after she did this one, she did another one for a friend with wider hips, and she followed the same pattern but used 3 panels instead. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed taking a step back into history with yarn.
Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are yearning. Though your lads are far away, they dream of home. There's a silver lining through the dark cloud shining. Turn the dark cloud inside out till the boys come home.
wasn't Susie so adorable? I loved the care that she had in her costume, like the Victorian plaits going down and her bonnet and her corset, you could see. Everything was fantastic. And you need to know this because when Susie recorded her segment, it was in the middle of a heat wave. So just imagine her sitting there. She's got a woolen petticoat on. She's got a big corset on underneath. She had that woolen little cap on for a while, and she still has a bright, smiling face. So well done, Susie.
Yeah, well, I'm glad she had stripes on that little woolen thing.
Yeah, I forget what that was called.
No, I didn't catch the name, but yes, important. You may also have noticed that Susie was knitting on white woolen, not white knitting needles, and those needles were actually made of bone. In the 19th century, the standard materials were either bone or steel, and then sometimes wood. Susie says that at home she knits on aluminium needles because the bone ones are so beautiful. She's really afraid of breaking them. So that was really funny. But she does bring them out for the special occasions. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the music there was Keep the Home Fires Burning, which was a really popular song during the First World War. The recording there was by the tenor John McCormack, who was one of the really early recording superstars. He was actually Irish, but he did get American citizenship, and he recorded that song in 1917. I think it's actually older, so it does really fit with the time period for Susie.
Yeah. So Susie's offering her beautiful yarn at a 15% discount to Fruity Knitting patrons. And that dark, rich chocolate colour just looked totally stunning. And her yarns come in all natural colours in a fingering weight and a medium weight. And the medium weight is probably close to a sports weight because she knits it at around 6 stitches to the inch. So thank you very much to Susie. Now we want to thank all of our wonderful patrons who have made 84 episodes possible. Thank you so much. Yeah. The show is only here because of patrons. And so we want to ask those of you who aren't patrons but who are watching to please become a patron. You can do so for a small amount. And this gives us stability so that we can plan to go forward in the future. This has proven to be so much work that it's too much for one person, and we had to either stop or Andrew stop his job and work with me. And that means that we do need more of our viewers to become patrons. So if you are watching, please do contribute. It's your small amount that's regular that helps this show, helps us have stability so that we can keep planning ahead. Thanks very much.
Yep, thank you. It is time now to announce the winners of our Woolly Wormhead Hat Cowl. We had heaps of participants, so thank you to everyone who got into that. It's really amazing to think of all of these stunning new Woolly Wormhead hats out in the world.
It's a good imagery.
Yeah, they're so distinctive and easy to pick. It's a really good picture to think of them all out there.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing them at the festivals. I'm sure they'll be there. We would love to give everyone a prize, but that's not possible, of course, so we have selected 2 winners.
So our first winner is entry number 72. Eve, who is Woolly Eve, and her daughter, who is Tiny T12, both knitted a fantastic Camden cap. And they named them Oliver Twist and the Artful Dodger. And I think they look fantastic there, wearing them together. Eve has added a little braid and buttons across the brim of her cap, which looks really great. So we're donating the prizes, and your prize will be a copy of the Japanese Stitch Dictionary by Hitomi Shida, which has got 250 stitch patterns in it. It's a fantastic book. So personal message me on Ravelry with your address and whether you would like the book in German or in English. So the second winner is entry 53, and that's Lynn, who is Moose Weaver, and Lynn knitted the beautiful Rhinebeck hat. So here it is with this luscious fuchsia pink running through it. And Lynn, your prize is a $25 gift voucher at the Schoolhouse Press online store. And the Schoolhouse Press is Meg Swanson's online store. And she has the very best selection of knitting books to choose from, as well as lots of yarn and kits and notions. By the way, Meg Swanson is Elizabeth Zimmerman's daughter. Most people know that, but just in case you didn't. And so Lynn, can you personal message me on Ravelry and I'll send you the gift voucher. So after our interview last episode with Jennifer Wood, lots of people got very excited about her designs and bought lots of her designs, and even looked in their library and realised that they had already bought her designs but hadn't knitted them up. So we thought, while the excitement's still going, we should start a Woodhouse Knits Cull. So we're backdating it to the 1st of August, and it's going to go to the end of November, and you can enter any one of Jennifer's designs during that time. And you can enter multiple times. So there's plenty of time to knit at least one garment, possibly even two. And so the details for that is in Ravelry, in a thread there. You can look. So join in, have lots of fun, comment and chat away, and help each other out.
Yep, that'll be good. Coming up now is part 2 of our interview with Melanie Berg, so we're going to say goodbye. Our daughter Madeline is home from university with us for a short time, so we're going to take a short holiday. We're going to take a 1-week holiday in France. It's about 2 hours drive. We'll be staying in a log cabin in the middle of the woods. Looking forward to some rest and some long walks.
Yeah.
So it is going to be 3 weeks before our next episode. So thank you very much for being with us today. We always enjoy having your company, and we'll see you in 3 weeks' time.
Bye.
Bye.
Playing with colour is also a really great way to produce dramatic effects, design effects. So can you show us some shawls where you've used colour in completely different ways to create unique effects? Mm-hmm. And then tell us how you've done it.
All right. So this one is on the Spice Market shawl I've released some years ago. Like this. So this was a lot of fun to make because, it uses many different colors. I've used a mini skein set. So these sets give you the option. They are not as expensive as buying a huge skein from each color that you want to use. And still you can be very playful with your colors. So this, I would say, it's really just the main feature of the shawl are the colors. So there is some stitch pattern going on, okay, but the first thing that everyone's eye is drawn to is, of course, the
gradient colors.
The gradient color combination. I like the fact that the yarn does so much of the work here. So you don't have to go overly complicated to create a beautiful result. Sometimes it's better to just stay simple and let the yarn do something for you.
So you've combined the gradients just with a neutral, haven't you?
Yes, I do that a lot because if I look in my wardrobe, I open the doors and it's all black and gray. So this is just, I don't know, the color I feel good in.
Well, it means you can wear all of your shawls every single day without planning.
That's right. That is right. So I could actually wear a shawl that is colorful all over. Yeah. But I usually want to provide a canvas so that the colorful, so either the color stitch pattern or the textured stitch pattern can really be on display. If the background is super busy, then the stitch detail will get lost. So I do that very, very often, that I use a neutral yarn for the background and then colors.
Yeah, and it breaks it up more, doesn't it? It just, it actually makes it blend more than having hard lines.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
Great. Okay. I'm getting a nice little pile here.
So this one is another one, and I would like to show the wrong side first because this is an example of slip stitch color work. So looking at the wrong side, you can see, okay, there is probably some stripes going on, but slip stitch color work produces vertical strands on the right side of your knitting and horizontal strands on the wrong side. So the effect of this is that when you only look at the wrong side, you have no idea about all the vertical accents going on the front. So let's take a look at the front of the shawl.
This is a stunning one. I got an early peek.
Isn't it?
That's really stunning.
All these vertical strands here are created by the slipped stitches, and again, what I like in this
hold
technique,
it straight so they can see it.
What I like in this technique is that it is easy to make, so you don't have to like work your brain a lot to get a beautiful result. And also focusing again on one single stitch pattern, it gives the shawl a very well balanced look. It's not like it's too overloaded or too crowded.
Yeah, I can see a theme here. I like the fact that you have these blank neutral sections and then you have a really beautiful looking pattern in a certain section of it.
Yes, it's again having a neutral color and something that is more...
Yeah, a neutral texture too.
Yes.
And then showing off something that's busier. Yeah.
Right.
That's beautiful. I really like this one.
Yeah, the effect is quite...
and I love the checkered.
Something you don't see a lot in knitting because vertical stripes are...
It normally means a combination of intarsia and ferrule if you've got... It's like
or
a
you
tartan.
have to like double stitch it or crochet it up. You have to find some sort of workaround.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have we got another one in the colour department?
This one.
Yeah.
Again, it is one very neutral black background colors, almost black. It's a very dark grey.
Yeah.
Brownish grey, so it's a warm tone, I would say. And then a really popping pink, which is something... So this pink, I would usually not use this because it's too much for me, for my personal taste. But having this neutral color next to
That's
it...
so dark and absorbing. Yeah.
Right, and it really balances it out. So I think this is perfect. I've worn this shawl a lot, although it's pink. But I just liked...
and I like the geometrical kind of lines. It's just like a maze, isn't it?
Right, and this is a mosaic knitting. So again, if we take a look at the wrong side, all you can see is the horizontal strands, and all the vertical little accents, they just get lost because they only show from the right side. And mosaic knitting is pretty cool actually because it looks very complicated. It's super easy to do.
Yeah.
So you can show off
it's
in front of your friends.
To show off.
Absolutely. Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so the big question is, and I think it's difficult for many people too, is what's your favourite way of wearing a shawl? Because you don't want to hide all the beauty in the wrapping around the neck.
Right.
That's what I always think.
It's a good question. And remember when I said the asymmetrical triangular shawls are my favorite shawls? That's also, they are easy to knit, usually, depending on the stitch pattern. But they are especially great to wear. And that's why... that's because usually if we want to feature a certain stitch pattern, this stitch pattern happens at the border from the shawls. So it's not you don't see it often that you have something going on in the center of the shawl and then you have a super boring border.
Yeah, that would be very sad.
It happens sometimes. It can be pretty cool, but usually it's the other way around. So let's say if you take a look at this shawl,
which is a
typical asymmetrical shawl.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I would say it is mainly black. So the main... It consists of 3 colors, but the black is very much in the foreground. Now, if we wear it like this, and this is actually my very favorite way of wearing a shawl, something interesting happens because all of a sudden the bright part is very much on
your
display.
face.
It's very prominent. So if you think of the bright part like being the border of the shawl, it is very easy to highlight the beautiful stitch pattern that you've put so much work into by wearing it like that. In comparison to that, let's take a look at...
But even with just sorry to interrupt you, but even a stitch pattern like this where it's all one colour, how would you try to display the lace more?
So in this shawl, the garter edge is actually the tip of the shawl.
Yeah.
So the tip is usually on display.
Yeah.
But because this shawl is so large, it wraps twice around the neck, and that's
And
where
so
the
you
lace...
can actually see a fair bit of lace down the
it
side,
displays,
can't you?
Right, it displays...
Actually, it probably looks good because that's like the... Let me see if I can do it. You can find the other...
I would start with the tip.
Would you? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Unless you really like to have long tips hanging down.
Okay, you show me. I normally don't wear shawls, so this is a good lesson for me.
Okay, so let's see. I would really start with this tip and then wrap big ones.
Oh, okay.
And then just keep wrapping to have it like this.
Okay.
And then you see that the lace shows as well as the garter stitch, so it's a bit of a mix.
I can see that. That actually looks good with the garter stitch down here in this case,
Yeah.
and then having shawl around here. Cool.
Could you give me this brown?
The brown
shawl?
one, yeah. That's a crescent shape, is it? Or?
Yeah, it's not constructed in a crescent way, but it's this semicircular, elongated shape. And I wanted to show something because remember when we said the stitch pattern is usually happening around the border, right? And now if we take a shawl with this shape and we wear it like exactly the same way we wore the asymmetrical one, the stitch pattern really gets lost a bit. You can see that something is going on here around the corner, but it just doesn't display quite as nicely as with the triangular shawl shapes. And I think this is also a reason why the asymmetrical triangular shapes are so hugely popular.
Because this also just looks great if it's lying flat. You want it to lie flat somehow, don't you?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you definitely are a shawl specialist.
I've made many.
You have, absolutely. So, and I know you've got a couple of really great tips that I'd like you to share with the viewers. And one of them is I'd like you to show us your quick and dirty method of sewing in the ends. And then just say something about how you look after your shawls and how you store them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so weaving in ends is something most knitters don't enjoy too much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like part of the process because really who wants to have all these ends still there?
Yeah.
So we kind of have to do something about them. And I'm using a way to weave in the ends, which sounds terrible. So that's why
You call it quick and dirty.
I call it quick. It's super quick. It's super dirty. I'm really glad that we're doing this on video here because that's a good way to actually show what I'm doing. So a lot of knitters are, I think this is the number one mistake when weaving in ends. They weave in for miles and miles and miles. So the longer the thread you are weaving in, the more notable it will be in the end. Usually you can, I don't know, something like 2 centimeters is perfectly enough. So here's how I do it.
Even with slippery yarn.
Well, like a 100% lace weight cobweb, I would not recommend.
Yeah.
It would just not work. But with usually everything from light fingering upwards, I'm using it all the time. So let's say I want to weave in this end. I would just thread a needle and then take my left index finger and thumb and I just squeeze the edge of the fabric where I want to weave the thread. And then this is important, I'm using a pointy needle. So it's not a blunt needle, it is very pointy. If I stab myself, I will bleed. So it really has a very, very piercy edge or tip. And so you point the needle into the fabric and pinching the fabric, and then you go right inside the fabric.
Okay, so through all of the bobbly bits.
Right, so with the skin on your thumb and on your index finger, make sure that the needle is not on either side, but instead that it goes right through the fabric. And then I pull through lightly, and then I go back into the opposite direction. And you see it is less than 1 centimeter, I would say, going back, and that's it.
And then you just cut it off straight there.
I cut it off. I will leave something like 2 millimeters and then give the fabric a little tug so that the end vanishes in there. Yes.
There you go.
Very
quick and dirty.
Very dirty. Very quick and very dirty.
I think people will be happy to see that. Okay, so what about storing because you must have hundreds.
Yes, I have a lot of shawls at home. I have 2 bins and I roll them so I don't fold the shawls. Like I roll them
Maybe
together.
You can show us with one of these. How would you roll it?
So just like this, and then roll it up. And then I put them into Ziploc bags to prevent moth and dust and stuff like that. And then I just put them into big bins standing on the floor. It's not the most beautiful way to store them, but it's safe and very functional.
Okay, well, this has been so much fun. We've just been whipping through our interview, but we do have to finish. So I've got one last question, and I'd like us to talk a little bit about social media.
All right.
So you've actually been very successful at growing your business through the use of social media. But social media, as we all know, can seem like a little bit of sometimes quite a lot of a roller coaster ride. So just say a few things about that. And have you found it difficult sometimes to keep a positive mindset? What's your relationship with social media?
So I think my relationship with social media changed very much over the past years. When I was still building my business and I was working like 60 hours a week or so, I put a lot of time in there, and I used to post 3, sometimes 4 times a day. Over the last couple of years, I found that it's too much work, and I don't want to spend so much time on social media. So I really reduced that. Nowadays, sometimes I don't feel like it, and I don't post for a week, and that's perfectly fine. As to keeping a positive mindset, I remember when I met my husband many years ago, he had this ability to just shake things off. And I didn't have this. Like when I was driving a car, and you know how it is when driving a car, sometimes you get stupid comments. So whenever I used to get a stupid comment, I would take it home with me, and I would like sit there and ask myself, oh, what have I done wrong? And it was ruining my day, right? Yeah. And then my husband walked in and he was like, don't think about it. So he just had this ability somehow. And I think I've learned from him a great deal about, not allowing things to come too close, and also not invading your very personal life. I do try to keep things I post knitting related, but I also put in a lot of my personal, opinions and things I do every day, and stuff I like or stuff I recommend. I do try not to post too much about my family life, for example, because this is my safe retreat, and this is like a very different part of my life. So I think having this separation is helpful. And also, as I said, my husband really helped me in just being a role model for me.
I think it's great to have people around you who think differently from you, because you then have the possibility of seeing how that looks in action, and that helps you to think, okay, well, maybe I can take that on more, and maybe I can,
Right. And also, hearing about different opinions is a good thing, because you're not entitled to having the one opinion that is the right one.
Yeah.
Right? So it's always a constant process of learning, of listening, of adapting, of getting new ideas in, and
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. It's been really lovely to sit here and talk to you and get to meet you in person, because we have sort of emailed
several times. Yeah.
Privately.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope,
I think they've learnt a lot. I think they're going to be really happy. So thanks so much. We'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.